Before we begin, understand this. I've told myself 1,000 lies to survive. The biggest one? That I knew who the enemy was. You're about to hear a story where the mission briefing was a trap. Not because of bad intel, not because of an ambush, but because the target had my mother's smile and my best friend's dog tags. Im Sergeant Elena Vasquez. This isn't a confession. It's a warning. When I hand you a photograph and say, neutralize this person, you look at the face. You memorize the jawline, the scar, the way they stand. You do not ask if they sing off-key in the shower. You do not wonder if they cry during old movies. I learned that rule too late. And now, I'm going to take you inside the worst 24 hours of my life. Not from the beginning, because the beginning is a lie. I'm going to start from the moment my world broke, then rewind to the joke that started it all, then fast forward to the choice that still wakes me up at 3 a.m. Grab something to hold on to. This doesn't go where you think. The sniper's crosshair trembled. That was my first clue that something was wrong. I don't tremble. Not anymore. Not after 3 tours, 2 Purple Hearts, and a therapist who told me I had the emotional availability of a brick wall. But there, prone in the dust of a collapsed olive grove, my right index finger resting on the curved metal of a trigger I'd pulled 47 times in combat. It shook. A microfraction. A heartbeat's worth of doubt. Through the Schmidt and Bender scope, the world was a green-tinted dream. The compound sat in a shallow valley 30 kilometers northeast of Mosul. 2 stories. Sand-colored concrete. A satellite dish angled wrong. And, standing by the northern window, backlit by a bare bulb, a figure in a gray tunic. The target. Intel said his name was Abu Nasir, senior logistics coordinator for a network that moved Iranian 122mm rockets into Syrian rebel hands. The briefing was clean: observe, confirm, eliminate if positive ID was made. We've been tracking him for 6 weeks. Satellite comms intercepts. A local source who'd later turn up in a drainage ditch with his tongue removed. But the figure at the window moved like someone who'd forgotten they were being watched. They stretched, rolled their neck. Then, and this is what hit me, they reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind their ear. Nasir was supposed to be bald. A scar across his left cheek from a shrapnel wound in 2016. 58 years old. Heavy smoker. This person had no scar. They moved with the loose-limbed grace of someone under 40. And that hair-tucking gesture? I'd seen it 100 times. On a picnic blanket in Virginia. In the back of a Humvee during a sandstorm. Across a dinner table where my mother asked why I never called. Vasquez. The voice in my earpiece belonged to Staff Sergeant Marcus Webb, my spotter, and the only man I trusted to tell me when I was being an idiot. You've been on that window for 12 seconds. Talk to me. I didn't answer. I adjusted the magnification. The figure turned slightly, and the light caught their profile. High cheekbones. A jaw that could cut glass. A small mole above the left eyebrow. My lungs forgot how to work. Vasquez. Webb again, sharper now. Your heart rate spiked. What's happening? I pulled back from the scope. The world rushed in. The smell of crushed sage, the grit of limestone under my elbows, the distant thud of an artillery piece somewhere west. My team was spread across the ridgeline, Webb to my right, prone behind a Leupold spotting scope. Corporal Tanisha, Nez below us, manning the javelin. Specialist Kevin Park at the comms relay, his face lit by the green glow of a tablet. And Staff Sergeant Luis Ortega, our breacher, already in position at the wadi, ready to move on my signal. Good people. Solid. The kind of soldiers who'd laugh at your worst joke and carry your body out of the kill box without hesitation. Target's a negative, I said. My voice came out wrong. Flat. Like someone else was using my throat. Webb lowered his binoculars. He was 42, 10 years older than me, with a face that had been handsome before a mortar turned it into a roadmap of scar tissue. What do you mean, negative? That's the compound. That's the window. We've had eyes on for 3 hours. It's not Nasir. Then who is it? I didn't have an answer that wouldn't sound insane. So I did what squad leaders do when they don't have answers. I bought time. Park, pull up the last 5 minutes of thermal. I want movement patterns. Park's voice came back thin and reedy, the way it always got when he was stressed. Thermal's clean. 1 heat signature on the 2nd floor. 2 on the ground level. No vehículos thought-provoking. No, he stopped. Wait. Sergeant, I've got a comms anomaly. Something's broadcasting on a closed NATO frequency. Low power. Almost like a beacon. A beacon. My blood went cold for a completely different reason. Beacons meant friendly forces. Friendlies meant this wasn't a simple HVT hit. It meant someone had lied to us. Ortega, I called. Status. The breacher's voice was a gravelly rumble, like rocks tumbling downhill. At the wadi, got eyes on the south wall. Someone's booby-trapped the gate. Improvised, not military. Tripwire to a daisy chain of 155s. This wasn't set by professionals. That was the second wrong note. Nasir's network used military-grade explosives. Russian. Precise. This was homemade. Desperate. I crawled backward from the firing position, keeping my rifle aimed at the window until the last possible moment. The figure had moved away now, deeper into the room. But I'd seen enough. We're pulling back, I said. Silence. Then Webb, slow and careful. Elena, we have direct orders. The colonel said, the colonel isn't here. I was already on my knees, collapsing the bipod. That's not Nasir. The security around the compound doesn't match his MO. And there's a friendly beacon bleeding out of that building. We're walking into a trap, or we're about to shoot the wrong person. Either way, I'm not greenlighting this. Nez spoke up. She was Navajo, quiet as stone, and had a habit of saying more in 10 words than most people said in 10 minutes. If it's a trap, we're already in it. Pulling back means crossing open ground. They'll have the wadi covered. She was right. Of course she was right. That's why she was my javelin gunner. She thought 2 steps ahead of the enemy and 3 steps ahead of me. Then, we don't pull back, I said. We change the mission. Park, can you give me a voice channel to that beacon? Another pause. I can try, but it'll light us up. Anyone monitoring will know exactly where we are. Do it. Webb grabbed my arm. His grip was hard enough to leave bruises. Sergeant, look at me. I looked. Who was in that window? The question hung between us like smoke. And for the first time in 15 years, I told the truth to someone who wasn't a chaplain or a therapist. I think it's my sister. Webb's scarred face didn't change, but his eyes did. They got older. Isabel. She's been missing for 8 months. Went to Jordan for an NGO job. Then nothing. No calls. No texts. The State Department said they were looking into it. I thought she was dead. And now she's in an ISIS logistics compound? I don't know. The words came out angry. Maybe it's someone who looks like her. Maybe I'm seeing things because I haven't slept in 40 hours. But that's why we're not shooting. Not until I know. Park's voice cut in. Got the beacon. It's encrypted, but I cracked the handshake. Audio only. Patching it through now. Static. Then a voice. Female. Hoarse. Speaking English with a faint Maryland accent. The same one I'd grown up with, the one I'd spent 20 years trying to lose. Repeat. This is Isabel Vasquez, civilian contractor, ID Juliet 907. I'm being held against my will. There are 2 guards. They change shifts every 4 hours. Please, if anyone can hear this, my sister is in the army. Sergeant Elena Vasquez. Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her I didn't mean to disappear. Tell her the transmission cut. No one spoke. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of diesel and rot from the valley below. Somewhere a dog barked, 3 sharp sounds, then stopped. Webb let go of my arm. Well, he said. Shit, that was the moment. The pivot. The exact second when the mission I'd been given died, and a new one, impossible, stupid, probably fatal, was born. I pulled out my map. New plan. Hark, record that transmission and send it to battalion. Tell them we have a friendly civilian in the target building. Request immediate extraction assets. They'll say no, Park said. The mission's black. No support. You know the rules. Then, tell them anyway. Nez, can you put a javelin through the south wall without collapsing the second floor? Nez thought about it. Maybe, if I use the anti-personnel setting and aim low. But it'll bring the roof down if I'm off by half a meter. Don't be off. Ortega, you're still our breacher. Once Nez opens the wall, you go in. Webb, and I will provide cover from the ridge. Park, you're on overwatch with the drone. Ortega's voice was calm, almost bored. And if the guards shoot your sister before I get there? I looked back at the compound. The figure had returned to the window. They were standing very still now, as if they knew they were being watched. Then, we make sure they don't get the chance. The next 20 minutes were a masterclass in controlled chaos. Nez hummed a Navajo prayer under her breath while she recalibrated the javelin's guidance system. Webb redistributed our ammunition, giving Ortega extra flashbangs and a breaching shotgun. Park argued with Battalion on the satellite radio, his voice climbing higher with each refusal. I watched the compound. The figure, Isabel, my brain kept insisting, even though I knew better, moved from window to window, occasionally pausing to look out at the dark hills. The two guards on the ground floor were more active now, pacing, checking their weapons. Someone had tipped them off. Battalion says negative on extraction, Park reported. They're sending a QRF, but ETA is 90 minutes. They also said, and I quote, remind Sergeant Vasquez that her primary objective is neutralization of HVT Nasir. Nasir isn't there, I said. I told them that. They said to confirm with a visual. I closed my eyes. The moral dilemma wasn't abstract anymore. It had a face. It had a voice on a crackling radio. It had my mother's cheekbones and my father's stubborn chin. If I followed orders, I'd kill whoever was in that window, possibly my sister, and go home with a clean conscience and a dirty soul. If I disobeyed, I'd save one person. Maybe. But I'd lose my career, my team might die, and the real Nasir would keep moving rockets. There was no third option. That's the lie they tell you in movies. There's always a third option. No. In the real world, there's the right choice and the easy choice. And sometimes they're the same. And sometimes they're not. Nez, I said, take the shot. She didn't hesitate. The javelin roared, a sound that punched through your chest and rearranged your organs. The missile streaked down into the valley, a comet with a grudge. It hit the south wall exactly where she'd aimed. The explosion was beautiful and terrible. Concrete turned to dust. Rebar screamed. A shockwave rolled up the ridge, hot and full of grit. When the smoke cleared, there was a hole in the compound big enough to drive a truck through. Go, I said. Ortega was already moving. He ran like a man who'd forgotten he could die. Low, fast, weaving between the olive trees. Webb laid down, suppressing fire from the ridge, his M4 cracking in steady, measured bursts. I joined him, aiming high, keeping the guards' heads down. Through my scope, I saw Ortega reach the breach. He tossed a flashbang inside. The world went white. Then he was through, his shotgun barking once, twice. Park's voice. One guard down. Second guard is retreating upstairs. He's got the civilian. Ortega, don't let him reach the roof, I said. If he gets her on the roof, we lose her. No response. Just the sound of boots on stairs, shouted Arabic, a single pistol shot. Then silence. Longest 3 seconds of my life. Ortega. My voice cracked. Got her. He sounded tired. She's alive. Banged up. Dehydrated. But alive. Guard's dead. I sagged against the rifle. Webb put a hand on my shoulder. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. Bring her out, I said. They emerged from the dust a minute later. Ortega half-carrying, half-dragging a woman in a gray tunic. Her hair was matted. Her face was bruised. But when she looked up at the ridge, at me, I saw the mole above her left eyebrow. Isabel. She smiled. It was a broken thing, more pain than joy. Hey, Ellie. Took you long enough. I couldn't speak. My throat had closed up, so I did the only thing I could. I stood up, exposed on the ridgeline, and waved. That's when the second missile hit. Not from Nez. From the north. From the real enemy's position. The ridge exploded. Came back online in pieces. First, sound. A high-pitched whine, like a television tuned to a dead channel. Then, the crackle of fire. Then, Webb, shouting my name from very far away. Second, touch. Sharp rocks under my back. Something warm and wet on my face. My left arm, numb, then burning, then numb again. Third, sight. The world was sideways. The sky was orange with fires. Park was on his hands and knees crawling toward me, his left ear bleeding. Nez was already on her feet, dragging the javelin tube toward new position. And Webb was standing over me, his silhouette framed by flames, an M4 in each hand. Get up, Vasquez. Right now. We're compromised. I tried to move. My left leg didn't respond. I looked down. A piece of shrapnel the size of a butter knife was sticking out of my thigh, just above the knee. Blood was making a small lake in the dirt. That's not good, I said. It's a scratch. Webb grabbed my vest and hauled me upright. Pain exploded up my spine. I bit down on a scream. Park, get the medical kit. Nez, where did that come from? North Ridge, she said. 400 meters. They had a tube. Maybe an RPG-7. They're repositioning now. Ortega. I asked. Still in the valley. He's got your sister. They're taking cover in the wadi. My sister. The word hit me like another explosion. Isabel was out there, alive, and now enemy combatants were between us. Park, I said. The QRF. Where are they? Park had reached me now, pulling out a tourniquet. His hands were steady, even though his face was gray. Still 60 minutes out. Battalion says we need to hold. We don't have 60 minutes. I pointed to the North Ridge. Those guys are going to flank us. Nez, can you get a shot? Not from here. They're behind Defilade. I need to move to the eastern spur. Then move. Webb, you're with her. Park, and I will hold this position and provide cover for Ortega. Webb shook his head. You can't even stand. I'm not leaving you. That's an order, Staff Sergeant. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He laughed. It was a dry, broken sound. You know, when I joined the Army, they told me sergeants were supposed to be reasonable. Nobody mentioned they'd be suicidal. Move. He moved. Nez followed, carrying the javelin like it weighed nothing. Within 30 seconds, they were swallowed by the dark. Park finished the tourniquet. The pain ratcheted up another notch. I gritted my teeth and raised my rifle. Ortega, I called. Status. Static. Then his voice ragged. We're pinned. 3 tangos on the north side of the wadi. They know we're here. Your sister's hit. My heart stopped. How bad? Grazed her arm. I stopped the bleeding. But she can't run. I closed my eyes. The math was brutal. 3 enemy fighters between us and the wadi. 2 of my team moving to flank. 1 breacher, 1 wounded civilian, and me, half-crippled, bleeding, running on adrenaline and spite. The easy choice was to wait for the QRF. Let them handle it. Keep my people safe. The right choice was to go get my sister. Park, I said. Give me your rifle. What? What? Because I'm going down there. You can't walk. I can crawl. He stared at me. Then, he did something that made me want to cry. He handed me his rifle, pulled out his pistol, and said, then I'm crawling with you. We went over the ridge like 2 wounded animals. On my belly, dragging my dead leg, rifle tucked under my right arm. Park crawled beside me, firing blind over the edge whenever someone shot at us. The enemy was disorganized. The missile hit had surprised them as much as us, but they were recovering fast. 50 meters from the wadi, a bullet hit the rock 2 inches from my face. Shards of stone sliced my cheek. I didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Isabel was down there. Ortega, I whispered into the radio. We're coming in from the south. Pop smoke on my mark. Mark! I pulled the pin on a smoke grenade and tossed it toward the enemy position. Orange smoke billowed, thick and chemical. The wind carried it sideways, but it was enough. The tangos shifted their fire. Park, and I slid into the wadi. Ortega was crouched behind a boulder, his shotgun trained on the smoke. Beside him, pressed against the rock wall, was Isabel. Her arm was wrapped in a bloody field dressing. Her eyes were wide, but when she saw me, she laughed. You look terrible, she said. You look worse. We match. Another bullet cracked overhead. The moment shattered. Ortega grabbed Isabel and pulled her deeper into the wadi. Park laid down, covering fire. I crawled after them, my legs screaming, my rifle barking at shadows. Where's Webb? Ortega asked. Flanking. They'll hit from the east in 2 minutes. We need to keep these tangos pinned until then. Easy for you to say. You're not the one with a shotgun against 3 rifles. Isabel spoke up. Her voice was thin but steady. There's a tunnel. Under the compound. The guards used it to bring in supplies. It comes out on the other side of the North Ridge. You're telling me this now? I was a little distracted by the explosions. Fair enough. Ortega, can you find it? He looked back at the compound. The south wall was still smoking. Maybe, if I go through the breach. But that's open ground. Then, don't go alone. I turned to Park. Go with him. Take Isabel. Get her through the tunnel. Webb, and I will handle the tangos. Park hesitated. Sergeant, your leg will still be broken after you leave. Go. He went. Ortega grabbed Isabel's good arm, and the 3 of them ran, low, fast, zigzagging, toward the smoking hole in the compound wall. The enemy saw them. Rounds kicked up dust at their heels. But they made it inside. I was alone in the wadi. The silence was worse than the gunfire. I could hear my own heartbeat, the drip of blood from my leg, the distant crackle of the fire on the ridge. Then, Webb's voice. We're in position. Nez has the shot. She could take all 3 with 1 javelin, but you're in the blast radius. How big? Too big. I looked at my leg. At the wadi walls, too steep to climb. At the 50 meters of open ground between me and the compound. Then, don't use the javelin, I said. Come down here and help me fight. That's a terrible plan. Got a better one? He didn't answer. But 30 seconds later, I heard boots sliding down the wadi wall. Webb landed next to me, four up, breathing hard. Nez stayed on the ridge, javelin ready, watching our backs. You're an idiot, Webb said. You've mentioned. The three tangos were moving now. They'd figured out we were in the wadi. One of them popped up over the edge, AK blazing. Webb put 3 rounds in his chest. He fell backward, silent. 2 left. They changed tactics. One lay down, suppressing fire while the other tried to flank around the north end of the wadi. Webb and I returned fire, but we were outnumbered and outgunned. My rifle clicked empty. I swapped mags with fingers that wouldn't stop shaking. Nez, I called. I need that shot. You're still in the blast zone. Not for long. Webb, cover me. I crawled, faster than I thought possible, dragging my dead leg, using my rifle as a crutch, crawling toward the compound. Bullets hit the ground around me. One tore through the back of my vest, stopped by the ceramic plate. Another grazed my helmet, spinning my head sideways. 10 meters. 5. 3. Now, Nez. Now. The javelin fired. I didn't see it. I was facing the wrong way, but I felt it. The heat. The pressure. The world turning white. Then, the blast wave hit me like a truck made of concrete. I flew. Tumbled. Landed on something soft that turned out to be Webb. He'd followed me. Of course he had. The man was too stubborn to die. You okay? I asked. My ears are ringing. That's not a no. We lay there for a moment, tangled together in the dirt, breathing the same smoke-choked air. Then I heard a voice. Isabel, shouting my name from inside the compound. I pushed myself up. The world spun. I threw up. Then I kept pushing. The tunnel was exactly where Isabel said it would be. A narrow shaft hidden under a false floor in the compound's kitchen. Ortega had already cleared it. Park was lowering Isabel inside when I limped through the breach. The tunnel leads to a wadi on the other side of the north ridge, Isabel said. From there, you can reach the extraction point. How do you know that? I was supposed to be moved tonight. The guards talked about it. They thought I didn't speak Arabic. I looked at her. Really looked. 8 months of captivity had carved new lines into her face. But her eyes were the same. Sharp. Fierce. Stubborn as hell. You're going first, I said. Park, go with her. Webb, Ortega, and I will follow. No, Isabel grabbed my arm. You're bleeding out. You go first. I'm the squad leader. I go last. Ellie, that's Sergeant Vasquez. Now move. She moved. But as she passed me, she whispered something I'll never forget. I knew you'd come. Everyone else gave up. But I knew. Then, she was gone, swallowed by the dark. The tunnel was hell. Low ceiling. Tight walls. Water up to my ankles, cold and foul-smelling. Every time I crawl, my legs screamed. Webb stayed behind me, pushing when I stalled. Ortega took point, his shotgun leading the way. We emerged into moonlight. The wadi on the other side was wider, shallower, filled with the same crushed sage and limestone. And there, hovering in the valley floor, was a helicopter. Black Hawk. No lights. No markings. But the sound of its rotors was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard. QRF's early, Park said. No, it'll be That's not QRF. That's not our extraction. The helicopter landed. The side door opened. A figure stepped out. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in civilian clothes, but moving like a soldier. He walked toward us with his hands raised, palms out. Sergeant Vasquez, he called. My name is David Shun. I'm with the CIA. I raised my rifle. Stop right there. He stopped. I'm here to take your sister into protective custody. Like hell you are. She's not a hostage, Sergeant. She's a defector. She's been working for us for 6 months. The world tilted. I looked at Isabel. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Isabel, I said, what is he talking about? She finally looked up. There were tears on her face. But her voice was steady. The NGO job was real. But after I was taken, they made me an offer. Information for my life. I said yes. Then, I kept saying yes. I fed them intel on Nasir's network. On the rockets. On everything. The guards weren't holding me. They were protecting me. From whom? From you. Shun stepped closer. The mission briefing you received was a test. We wanted to see if you'd follow orders. If you'd kill your own sister for a target that didn't exist. You passed. I lower my rifle, not because I believed him, because my arms were too tired to hold it up. You used us, I said. You used my team. You put us in a kill box to run some psychological experiment. We put you in a position to make a choice, Chin said. And you chose right. That's why we want you for a new operation. One that actually matters. Behind me, Webb laughed. It was the ugliest sound I'd ever heard. You people are insane. Maybe, Chin admitted. But we're also the only ones trying to stop the next war. So what's it going to be, Sergeant? Do you want to go home and pretend this never happened? Or do you want to help us finish it? I looked at my team. Park, pale and shaking. Nez, her face unreadable. Ortega, cleaning his shotgun like this was just another Tuesday. Webb, standing close enough to catch me if I fell. And Isabel, my sister, who had lied to me, who had let me believe she was dead, who had smiled at me from a window and said nothing. Get on the helicopter, I told Chun. He raised an eyebrow. Is that a yes? That's a get on the helicopter before I change my mind and shoot you. He smiled. Then he turned and walked back to the Black Hawk. Isabel didn't move. Ellie, I'm sorry. I know. I didn't have a choice. Neither do I. I limped past her toward the helicopter. Neither do any of us. The flight back to Erbil was silent. Not the comfortable silence of people who know each other. The other kind. The silence of words that can't be unsaid. Isabel sat across from me, her bandaged arm cradled in her lap, staring out the window at the dark desert below. Chin was on the comms, speaking in low tones to someone who wasn't there. My team huddled together on the bench seats, checking weapons that didn't need checking, avoiding eye contact. I watched my sister's reflection in the plexiglass. She looked older, not just from 8 months of captivity, but from whatever had happened inside her head. The same thing that happened to all of us eventually. The moment when you realize the line between right and wrong isn't a line at all. It's a smear. You should get that leg looked at, Isabel said without turning around. It can wait. It can't. You've lost a lot of blood. I've lost more. She finally turned. Her eyes were red-rimmed. You hate me. I don't hate you. You should. I thought about it. Did I hate her? For lying? For making me believe she was dead? For turning a simple mission into a moral maze? No, that wasn't hate. That was exhaustion. That was the bone-deep tiredness of someone who'd been fighting for so long they'd forgotten what peace felt like. I don't hate you, I said again. But I don't trust you either. She nodded, like she'd expected that, like she deserved it. The helicopter landed at Forward Operating Base Sykes at 0300. The flight surgeon took one look at my leg and started shouting. I ended up on a gurney, then in an operating room, then in a recovery bed with an 4 drip and a morphine button I wasn't supposed to push. I pushed it anyway. When I woke up, Webb was sitting in the chair beside my bed. He had a coffee in one hand and a tablet in the other. His scarred face was unreadable. You've been out for 12 hours, he said. What did I miss? The real Nasir was killed in a drone strike 2 hours ago. Chen's people coordinated it. They used the intel your sister provided. So it was all real. The mission, the test, all of it. Looks that way. I stared at the ceiling. It was white, boring, full of fluorescent lights that hummed in a key that made my teeth hurt. Where's Isabel? Debriefing. She's been in a room with 3 spooks since we landed. They're not letting her leave. Protective custody? Or something. Webb set down the tablet. Elena, what are you going to do? About what? About Chin's offer. The new operation. I hadn't thought about that. I've been too busy bleeding and sleeping and trying not to feel. But now the question was back, sitting on my chest like a bag of bricks. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to go home. See Mom. Sleep in a real bed. Eat something that doesn't come in a brown packet. And the other part, the part that had crawled through a tunnel with a shredded leg. The part that had watched her sister's face through a sniper scope and chosen to disobey. The part that was already thinking about the next mission, the next target, the next impossible choice. The other part wants to find Chun and tell him yes. Webb was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I'd go with you. You don't have to. I know. That's why I'm telling you. I closed my eyes. When I opened them again, he was gone. The chair was empty. The coffee cup was still warm. The next 3 days were a blur of medical checks, official statements, and uncomfortable conversations. I talked to Battalion about the mission. I talked to the chaplain about my feelings. I talked to a major from JAG about whether I'd violated the laws of armed conflict by not shooting my sister. The major said I was fine. The chaplain said I wasn't. I believed both of them. On the fourth day, Chun came to see me. He looked different in daylight. Smaller, less like a spook, and more like a tired, middle-aged man who'd seen too much. He sat in Webb's chair and folded his hands in his lap. Your sister is being moved to a safe location, he said. She won't be able to contact you for a while. How long? I can't say. Can you say anything? He smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. The operation I mentioned. It's real. It's important. And it needs someone like you. Someone who disobeys orders. Someone who knows when orders are wrong. He leaned forward. The people we're after, Sergeant, they're not monsters. They're not cartoon villains. They're fathers, mothers, people who believe they're doing the right thing. That's what makes them dangerous. That's what makes them hard to stop. And you want me to stop them. I want you to understand them. Then stop them. I looked at the 4 on my arm, the bandage on my leg, the photograph on my bedside table, my squad, taken 6 months ago, all of us smiling like we didn't know what was coming. If I say yes, I said, my team comes with me. Chun shook his head. That's not how this works. Then, I'm not interested. Sergeant, my team isn't just a group of soldiers. They're the only reason I'm alive. Webb, Nez, Park, Ortega. They're not interchangeable. They're not assets. They're people. And if you want me to do your dirty work, you take all of us or none of us. Chun studied me for a long moment. Then he stood up. I'll see what I can do. He left. The door closed. And I was alone with the hum of the fluorescent lights and the photograph of my squad and the memory of my sister's face in a sniper scope. I pushed the morphine button. Nothing happened. The nurse had disconnected it. That night, I dreamed of the Wadi. Not the real Wadi. The dream Wadi. It was the same place, but different. The rocks were softer. The sky was purple. And standing at the far end, in a gray tunic, was Isabel. She was smiling. Not the broken smile from the compound. A real one. The kind she'd worn when we were kids, catching fireflies in the backyard, believing the world was safe. Come on, Ellie, she said. It's not far now. I tried to walk. My leg wouldn't move. I can't, I said. Yes, you can. My leg. It's not your leg. It's your head. She was right. It was always my head. The part of me that couldn't let go. Couldn't forgive. Couldn't stop seeing the crosshair tremble. I woke up sweating. The room was dark. The fluorescent lights were off. And someone was sitting in the chair. Webb, I said. No, Isabel's voice. It's me. I sat up. My leg screamed. I ignored it. How did you get in here? I have friends in low places. She leaned forward. The moonlight caught her face. She looked younger in the dark. Less haunted. I'm leaving in an hour. I wanted to say goodbye. Chin said you were being moved. He did. But I wanted to tell you myself. We looked at each other across the dark room. 2 sisters. 2 soldiers. 2 people who'd made choices that couldn't be unmade. I'm sorry, she said. For everything. For lying. For making you come after me. For not telling you the truth. Would I have believed you? Probably not. Then stop apologizing. She laughed. It was a small sound, fragile but real. You always were the practical one. Someone had to be. She stood up, walked to the door, paused with her hand on the handle. Ellie, yeah. Whatever Chin asked you to do, whatever comes next, remember that you chose right. In the Wadi, on the ridge, you chose right. I chose my sister. Same thing. She left. The door closed. And I lay back in the bed, staring at the dark ceiling, listening to the hum of the bass settling around me. The next morning, I found Webb in the chow hall. He was eating eggs that looked like rubber and drinking coffee that looked like mud. Park sat across from him, poking at a pancake. Nez and Ortega were at the next table, arguing about something in low voices. I limped over and sat down. You're out of bed, Webb said. I'm out of bed. Leg okay. It'll heal. He pushed his coffee toward me. I took a sip. It was terrible. Chin came to see me. I said, he wants me on a new operation. The one from the helicopter? Yeah. What did you say? I looked at my team. Park, who'd crawled through gunfire to save a woman he'd never met. Nez, who'd fired a javelin with me in the blast zone. Ortega, who'd carried my sister out of hell. Webb, who'd never once asked if I was worth following. I told him I wouldn't go without all of you. Webb set down his fork. And he said he'd think about it. Park spoke up. His voice was thin but steady. Sergeant, you don't have to protect us. We're soldiers. We know the risks. This isn't about risks. This is about trust. I looked at each of them in turn. Chin's people play games. They lie. They test you. They put you in impossible situations, and watch what you do. I'm not doing that alone. If we go together. Or we don't go at all. Nez spoke. The Navajo have a saying. Walk in beauty. It means don't do ugly things alone. Because ugly things done alone become ugly things done forever. That's what I'm saying. Ortega's tract. I'm in. The army's boring anyway. Webb shook his head, but he was smiling. You're all insane. You know that. That's why we're a team, I said. 2 weeks later, Chin called. The operation was real. The team was approved. And I was standing in a hangar at an undisclosed location, watching my soldiers load gear onto a C-130 that smelled like jet fuel and ambition. Isabel was gone. No calls. No messages. Just a postcard that arrived at my apartment 3 months later, showing the skyline of the city I didn't recognize. On the back, in her handwriting, still walking. Still choosing right. Love you, Ellie. I kept the postcard in my helmet liner, where I could feel it against my forehead, where it reminded me that the crosshair still trembled. And that was okay, because the crosshair was supposed to tremble. That's how you knew you were still human. That's how you knew you hadn't become the monster you were hunting. And that's how you survived the choice between right and easy. You chose right. Every time, even when it hurt. Especially when it hurt. And you never ever did it alone.